Roofless, Episode 3, written by Kelly Alston, told by Sonia Lampley. Previously on Episode 2, Laverne had to face the news that her mother's new engagement and soon to be marriage would cause her to have to relocate to another state, leaving behind her infant daughter, who had been dropped off with another couple by Laverne and Chicken. Chicken had left for the military, trying to move forward with his new life. Frankie had received a phone call from a friend that Lonnie was cheating. Frankie went and bought a gun. She claimed it was for protection. And now for episode 3, told by Sonia Lampley. 1.
Red and blue lights danced across the polished windows of the mansion as neighbors gathered quietly along the sidewalks, whispering among themselves. Police cruisers, ambulances, and flashing cameras transformed the once peaceful neighborhood into a scene no one could have imagined. A stretcher rolled in quickly across the front lawn. Lonnie lay motionless, his face pale, his white shirt stained with blood as paramedics worked frantically to stabilize him. 14-year-old Grace stood frozen on the front porch, unable to look away. Her hands trembled as she clutched the porch railing. She understood enough to know that her life had just changed forever. Only moments earlier, the house had erupted with shouting. Then came a single gunshot. Now strangers filled every room. A police officer approached her slowly and lowered himself to one knee. "Sweetheart, what's your name?" "Grace." "Grace," he said gently. "Is there any other family member we can call?" She opened her mouth to answer, but no words came. She simply stared as Frankie was escorted from the house in handcuffs. For one brief moment, Frankie's eyes met hers. Neither of them spoke. The woman who had raised her looked as though she wanted to say 1,000 things, but the words never came, and the officer guided Frankie into the back seat of a patrol car. The door slammed shut. The sirens grew louder before slowly fading into the distance. Grace remained standing on the porch, watching until the flashing lights disappeared beyond the gates of the estate. Silence settled over the mansion. For the first time in 14 years, Grace understood that a house could be filled with expensive furniture, priceless artwork, and every luxury imaginable, and still become empty in a single afternoon. She didn't know where she would sleep that night. She didn't know whether Lonnie would survive. She didn't know if Frankie would ever come home again. She only knew that the life she had always known had vanished in the space of a single heartbeat. And without realizing it, Grace had just taken the first step toward being roofless. Night had fallen by the time the last ambulance disappeared from the neighborhood. Yellow crime scene tape stretched across the entrance of the mansion Grace had called home for 14 years. Police officers moved in and out of the house, carrying cameras, evidence bags, and clipboards. Grace stood on the sidewalk with nowhere to go. Earlier, she had awakened in a bedroom larger than some people's apartments. Her closet had been filled with clothes. Her bathroom had marble floors. Downstairs, there had been food in the refrigerator and money in the house. Now, she couldn't cross her own front door. "Miss, you can't go in there." Grace turned toward the officer standing near the driveway. "But I live there." "I understand, but this is an active crime scene." "My clothes are in there." "I'm sorry." Grace looked past him at the house. My whole life is in there. The officer's expression softened, but the answer remained the same. I wish I could help, but you still can't go inside. Grace stepped away from the yellow tape. One by one, the neighbors who gathered to watch the excitement disappeared behind their gates and locked their doors. Porch lights went out, curtains closed. No one asked where Grace was going. No one seemed to notice that she wasn't going anywhere at all. Earlier, someone had asked whether she had family. Grace had shaken her head. There were no grandparents she knew, no aunts, no uncles, no cousins. Frankie and Lonnie had never told her much about where she came from, and Grace had learned long ago not to ask too many questions. Someone else had said an officer would handle it. Another person had assumed she had gone to the hospital with Lonnie, but somewhere in the confusion, everyone thought Grace belonged to someone else, and no one realized she belonged to no one. Grace walked. At first, she had no destination. She simply needed to get away from the flashing lights and the whispers. She walked past the iron gates that separated her neighborhood from the rest of the city. She walked past doors preparing to close. She walked past restaurants where families sat together beneath warm lights. Through the windows, she watched people eating, laughing, passing plates, arguing over small things that suddenly seemed like privileges. Her stomach growled. She reached into her pocket. Nothing. Her purse was inside the house. Her phone was inside the house. Everything she owned was behind yellow tape. By midnight, the temperature had dropped. Grace sat down at a bus stop and wrapped her arms around herself. For the first time, she wondered where people went when there was nowhere to go. A bus pulled up. The doors opened. You getting on? The driver asked. Grace looked down at her empty hands. I don't have any money. The driver stuttered her for a moment. Then he opened the doors wider. Get on. Grace stepped aboard. She had no idea where the bus was going. For the first time in her life, she didn't know where she was going either. As the bus pulled away, Grace looked through the window toward the distant lights of the neighborhood that she had once called home. Behind her stood a mansion. Ahead of her was the unknown. And somewhere between the two realities sat a 14-year-old girl who had a roof that morning and nowhere to sleep that night. You have listened to episode 3. If you enjoyed it, please like and share. And remember, listener's discretion is advised.